Hi, it's Katrina. From entire spacecraft to luxury cars worth millions, here are 10 of the most unique and amazing abandoned vehicles in the world. Number 10. Fortune in a barn. And I am talking a big fortune. In early 2018, a North Carolina man named Warren Cramer contacted barn find hunter host Tom Cotter about two extremely valuable classic cars inside his friend's garage. The city had recently condemned the unoccupied property, and the house and garage were slated for demolition, so the two cars needed to be relocated, and fast. One was a 1966 Ferrari 275 GTB2 and the other a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427. I'll take the Shelby Cobra. They had languished in the homeowner's garage for 27 years. His trusted mechanic passed away in 1991, and the owner was understandably picky about who he was going to hire to work on his rare cars. He never found anyone to take over the job, and so they sat. Even after nearly 3 decades of neglect, the cars should still be worth something, right? Actually, a lot. Hagerty, a classic car insurance company, estimated the car's cumulative value at $4 million. No local towing companies would relocate them due to the risks associated with moving such valuable cargo. Cotter had no choice but to transport the cars himself. Although they were dusty and infested with crickets and mice, both cars were in surprisingly good shape for having sat for so long. The Shelby-built Cobra had just 19,000 miles on it, and the Ferrari, which the owner had purchased in the early 80s for $47,000, had a little over 13,000 miles. Gooding & Company sold the vehicles as is at their Amelia Island, Florida auction for $3.5 million. When the cars were serviced before the event, they started right up, although their exhaust pipes spewed rodent droppings across the garage. In Cotter's words, it was a small price to pay. He's right. Number 9. Kiska Submarine. On the far-flung Aleutian island of Kiska in Alaska sits an orca-shaped midget submarine from World War II. The Japanese Navy brought 6 of them when they occupied the island in 1942, but just one remains, serving as a rusting, lonely reminder of a contentious chapter in world history. Today, the battery-powered 78-foot submarine, which was built for just 2 men, sits in the grass off Kiska Harbor. I don't know if you're claustrophobic, but I couldn't imagine a worse job, archaeologist Debra Corbett told the Anchorage Daily News. You have to be really mentally tough to manage that small space with just one other person for a long period of time. Kind of like being in quarantine. Midget subs like this could only dive about 100 feet and had a range of 90 miles at 6 knots. They also could not be charged at sea, meaning ships had to recover them. A researcher said this was not a suicide sub, but it was not known for a high survivability for the occupants either. So yeah, probably not the best job unless you like the adrenaline rush. Then it's perfect. The Japanese spent 14 months at Kiska with 7,200 soldiers stationed there at one point. The American and Canadian militaries reclaimed Kiska in August 1943 in a joint mission called Operation Cottage. They expected resistance from the Japanese, who instead fled before the forces even arrived, leaving behind reminders of their former presence, one of which remains visible to this day. Eventually, however, the submarine will just rust away. Number 8. Excavator Graveyard. You want to know where the world's biggest collection of deserted diggers is? They are located at a former East German coal mine in Ferropolis, northeastern Germany, where they sit abandoned, and each weighs up to 2,000 tons. Built in 1941, the Mosquito is the site's oldest digger. Between 3 and 5 operators were required to run the 223 by 92-foot excavator. Mad Max, a 263-foot wide digger dating back to 1952, also needed a 3 to 5 member crew. At over 328 feet long, it took 5 to 7 operators to run Medusa, who was built in 1959. The Gemini digger is the largest of the machines, measuring 410 feet long. 6 to 8 people were required to control the contraption, which dates back to 1958. Built in 1984, the big wheel digger is the newest. 3 to 5 operators were needed for this beast. Would you give it a try? The machines are legally protected, even though nobody has used them since mining stopped in 1991, shortly after Germany reunited. In 1995, the site reopened as an industrial museum. And now for number 7. But first, big shout out to The Colombian and Ken Lapsora, who is a new subscriber. Welcome to the club. Be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already and join us. Number 7. The Rohr Aerotrain. Developed by French engineer Jean Bertin, the Aerotrain was an experimental tracked air cushion vehicle, better known as a hovertrain. The contraption traveled over a reinforced concrete monorail track on an air cushion created by powerful compressors. Designed to eliminate the rolling resistance of wheeled vehicles, it could travel at unprecedented speed without the complications and costs that came with the similarly designed maglev's complex electromagnetic track. The US-based company Rohr Industries, Inc. licensed the technology in 1969 and built a $10 million fully operational prototype, hoping to defeat competitors for a high-speed ground transportation contract with the US Department of Transportation. The 94-foot electric prototype was designed to hold 60 passengers and could travel at 150 miles per hour. But government funding ceased, and the Rohr prototype was never commercialized. It went on display at the Pueblo Aircraft Museum and remained there until 2009, when it was relocated to the Pueblo Rail Museum, which announced its intentions to restore the train and put it on public display. Number 6. Backyard Ferrari. Only 25 of the extremely rare 1950 Ferrari 166mm Barchetta were ever made. Surprisingly, most of them still exist, according to automotive historian Michael T. Lynch. This was the car that made Ferrari, he told SF Gate. It was absolutely timeless from the day it was made. Ferrari had only been in business for 3 years when the model debuted. Over a half-century ago, a man living in Europe purchased one for his friend, Reg Lee Litton of Scottsdale, Arizona, and shipped it to the US. He probably paid between $5,000 and $8,000, according to Lynch. Litton enjoyed his Ferrari, but it eventually broke, so he parked it in his backyard, covered it with carpets and plastic, and basically forgot about it. It sat there until he died, and at some point someone removed the rugs, leaving the car exposed to the elements. Litton's children ultimately sold the Ferrari for guess how much? Guess. Go ahead. Guess. About $1 million, even though it was in pretty rough shape. Luckily, the buyer, De La Rose, was attracted to the Barchetta's originality, even if its paint was extremely faded and chipped. The biggest surprise came when Arroz researched the car and realized it was in numerous famous races during its glory days, including Le Mans and Silverstone. While rebuilding the engine, Ferrari expert Patrick Otis discovered the date 6/9/49 etched into the motor, confirming that legendary driver Juan Manuel El Chueco Fangio had raced the car. Number 5. Wild Eyes. In January 2010, 16-year-old Abby Sunderland left Marina del Rey, California in her 40-foot yacht, Wild Eyes, to attempt to sail solo around the world. Sailing was in Sunderland's blood. The previous year, her elder brother, Zach, became the first person under 18 to sail around the world. Abby's parents purchased the blindingly yellow Wild Eyes for her shortly after that and customized it for her upcoming trip. Sounds like Abby and Zach kind of had a little sibling rivalry. The Australian-built vessel experienced electrical and fuel problems right off the bat, forcing the teen to restart her voyage 10 days later from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Several months later in June, Sunderland activated her emergency satellite beacons from a remote part of the Indian Ocean, halfway between Madagascar and Western Australia, as Wild Eyes combated 50-foot waves and 60-knot winds. A French vessel rescued her, and she left her banana-colored boat behind in the terrifying storm. Nobody saw Wild Eyes again until nearly 9 years later, when an aircraft spotted it in the waters off southern Australia, floating upside down. The barnacle-covered yacht's signature eyes were faded and worn, and its mast had broken off during the storm that forced Sunderland to call for help. The vessel's reappearance was emotional for Sunderland, who said years earlier that she never expected the boat to be found. Number 4. Soviet Space Shuttles. The Buran program was a Soviet reusable space shuttle project that began during the space race, a decades-long competition between the United States and the USSR to be the first to achieve milestones in space. The Soviet Union built the Buran spacecraft in an attempt to one-up NASA's space shuttle program. In the USSR, the space shuttle was viewed first of all as a carrier of nuclear weapons, Anatoly Zak wrote on his website RussianSpaceWeb.com. In 1976, despite apparent skepticism in the space industry, the Soviet government decided to respond to the shuttle threat with a similar spacecraft. Buran was built to hold 6 passengers, with extra cargo space for satellites measuring up to 56 feet long. After 24 domestic test flights, 15 of which were fully automatic, Buran launched into space on November 21, 1988. It orbited twice, then re-entered the atmosphere before successfully touching down under automatic control, which NASA's spacecrafts couldn't do. But the project's timing couldn't have been worse. The Soviet Union collapsed 3 years later in 1991, and the program was subsequently cancelled. 3 surviving Burans sit abandoned inside a hangar in modern-day Kazakhstan. They never ended up in museums due to both a lack of interest and logistical difficulties. During a visit in 2017, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Rogozin described the Buran, stating the shuttles and the rocket have been exposed to dust, bird poop, and extreme temperatures for almost 30 years. Time has left its mark. But other than that, they're in rather good condition. Number 3. Overland Train Mark II. In 1958, the U.S. government commissioned the Texan company Le Tourneau to build the TC-497 Overland Train Mark II, a massive off-road land train designed to carry up to 150 tons of cargo. The 572-foot-long, 54-wheel drive vehicle was powered by 4 solar gas turbine engines with a cumulative 4,680 horsepower. They were spread throughout the train, with one being housed in the control car. The 6-wheeled cab was 30 feet tall, with bathrooms, sleeping quarters, a kitchen, and a 6-person carrying capacity. This gargantuan vehicle was slow, traveling around 20 miles per hour. When fully loaded, it could cover a 350 to 450-mile distance. The Army began testing the Mark II in 1962, and it performed well, but heavy lift or freight helicopters like the Sikorsky S-64 Sky Crane started coming out the same year, and the military abandoned the project. It was a tad too late. The experimental vehicle was never used again and was mostly sold for scrap, while the control cab remains at the Yuma Proving Ground in Arizona. Number 2. TSS Duke of Lancaster. Built at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, the TSS Duke of Lancaster was a British passenger ferry and cruise ship. When she first went into service, she had some of the best first-class service around, but she soon fell out of favor for newer ships. To compete with the car ferries that appeared during the 1960s, the Duke of Lancaster's owners modified her carrying capacity to hold 105 cars and 1,200 passengers. The Duke of Lancaster took her last voyage in 1978. A company purchased the ship, which it planned to convert into a leisure and retail center called the Fun Ship, and docked her in North Wales. But these plans fell through due to legal disputes with the local council, and the new owner, John Rowley, gave up. He permanently closed the ship in 1983. Explorers occasionally gain access to the inside of the rusting ship, but it's rare. In the past, the abandoned vessel mainly attracted classic arcade game enthusiasts because of its 50 games, including some rare and valuable pieces. But the games were sold and removed from the rusting, graffiti-covered ship, which remains at its mooring place. Number 1. Dubai's Abandoned Supercars. It's rare to see an extremely nice abandoned car, unless you're in Dubai, that is. Every year, between 2,000 and 3,000 luxury supercars are abandoned throughout the United Arab Emirates. Cars that pose safety hazards or obstruct traffic are eventually impounded, Waste Management Department Director Abdul Majeed Saifaie told Drive Tribe, while others sit for years before being recovered. Many of the abandoned vehicles there are luxury supercars. In recent years, several Lamborghinis, Porsches, Bentleys, BMWs, Nissan Skylines, a limited edition Ferrari Enzo, and a Honda NSX were left behind in places like airports and parking lots. The phenomenon has sparked rage across the internet, with many people assuming that disgustingly rich car owners get bored with their toys and just discard them. But this is more likely an ensuing effect of the global financial crisis, along with Dubai's struggle against dropping oil prices. In the UAE, which is governed largely by Sharia law, it's a crime to default on a loan, and there are no bankruptcy laws or other protections for people who fall behind on their car and credit card payments and mortgages. Failing to keep these financial obligations can result in imprisonment, and people are blacklisted after missing just one payment. As a result, many expats flee the UAE the moment that they are blacklisted. Locals are also affected. The one upside to these heavy-handed financial laws is that car lovers can acquire a luxury car for pennies to the dollar. Car owners have just 15 days to retrieve their impounded vehicle before it goes to auction, and by the sounds of it, most people don't want their car back. Thanks for watching! Which abandoned vehicle would you get? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!